All right, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Good to everybody here this morning and on time. That's, it's like Jesus showed up or something, huh? Hey, if you haven't already, take a moment to check in from your church center app. Look at that. Even the old guy is doing it. Come on now. If you have not checked in back at the check-in station, open up Church Center, hit the little more button with the 3 dots, and check yourselves in. Obviously, if you have children, you had to check in out at the check-in station, but I just checked me and Sharon in, and we're here now. Very good. So make sure and check in. And let me again encourage you to take time to scroll through Over the Hump C2 Essentials, the link when they get posted. Those are really, really, really important. And we can see the number of views that those newsletters have had. And 95 times out of 100, I can tell you when we're getting questions about, oh, I didn't know anything about that, all right? Where was that? 95 times out of 100, I can go into the views and go, oh, yeah, views are down this week. People didn't open up Over the Hump, or they didn't open up the C2 Essentials. So we really, really, really try, and we cut down on the dings in your Church Center app if we can get people to actually open up Over the Hump and open up C2 Essentials. And so when people aren't seeing those things, then we have to resist the urge to double announce it in alerts and reminders. So yeah, just a reminder that we paid Jenny. Jenny is walking up the stairs right now. We paid Jenny good money to put those together, and so please make it worth your while as well as Jenny's by staying tuned in those things. Sorry. I had a couple things hit my brain all at the same time. This week's been a rough week for some folks. Tim Keller passed away this week. And faithful, consistent servant of the Lord. I believe he had pancreatic cancer. And has struggled with that for about the last year, and went home to be with the Lord this week. Julie Groff, her father, passed away, I believe, Wednesday night. Wednesday evening. The services were yesterday in Virginia, and so we probably won't see any of the Groffs here today. I doubt that they're back. And then if you are not aware, a former attender of our church, Francie Simpson, passed away this past Friday. And so, yeah. So want to keep her family in our prayers during this time. Let's go to the Lord in prayer this morning, all right? God, it is our privilege to come before you, to sit at your feet, to soak in your word, to walk with the godly, and to just be part of your church. God, I pray that we would walk in humility. I pray that we would walk in submission. I pray that we would walk in love. We live in a world full of hate and judgment and bitterness and divisiveness. God, may your church not be that place. May those things just not even creep in to the body. And may we all be sentinels, warriors against those things creeping into the body and creeping into the fellowship of the church. And so I pray for our time together in the Word today. I do lift up these families that have lost loved ones. Some expected, some very unexpected. And we only mentioned 3, and there may be very many more that our people are aware of. But I do lift them up before you now and pray, God, that as comfort is given, as mercy is shown, as love and compassion are shown, I pray that the message of your love for us would shine through those things. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. I pulled up an email the other day that in the passing of Tim Keller, several had 50 famous quotes of Tim Keller's, and I think a couple of them apply to what we're talking about, and so I wanted to read them to you this morning. One of them was this. It says, contemporary people tend to examine the Bible, so contemporary people, us. Contemporary people tend to examine the Bible looking for things they can't accept. But Christians should reverse that, allowing the Bible to examine us looking for things God can't accept. Do you hear the difference in that? A lot of times we look for things that we look for things in the Bible that we can't accept. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. But Christians should reverse that, allowing the Bible to examine us. We look into the mirror of the Word, looking for things that God can't accept. And then in the first week, I know we talked about just the idea that none of us are perfect. I don't know if you realize this, but God in His infinite wisdom, I've made this statement a few times this week, and just as we're on this subject of God's design for the biblical home, it just tends to resurface in multiple places. But in God's beautiful design for marriage and God's beautiful design for parenting, in His infinite wisdom, He designed those things that those firsts, we get married as novices. We get married without experience. We engage in, the most intimate part of marriage as novices. God designed it that way. He designed it to where we're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And parenting. I mean, no one starts parenting. Now, again, I'm not saying we don't have maternal skills, we don't have nurturing skills, we don't have some of those things. But when you have your first child, you have no clue how to parent. And God designed it that way. We don't come into those things as experts, and as a result, we make mistakes, right? And sometimes we have a hard time forgiving ourselves for those mistakes. And I ran across this quote that I think applies to that and may step on a toe or two this morning. To say I know God forgives me, but I can't forgive myself, means you've failed an idol whose approval is more important than God's. I know God forgives me, but I can't forgive myself, is to say you've failed an idol whose approval is more important than God's. It's arrogance, right? It's arrogance to say I don't forgive myself. I can't forgive myself for what I've done. I know God forgives me, but I can't forgive myself. And so, that's part of what we're discussing is the reality that some of us have made some mistakes. Some of us have made horrific mistakes. Some of us have made mistakes we can't walk back in this subject. And the goal is in this field of subject of God's design for the biblical home. But the goal is not that we walk away feeling guilty. The goal is that we walk away changed. We walk away transformed. And if we can't change something in our own family, something that's irreversible, and there's very few things that are irreversible, but if there's something that's irreversible, we can have an impact on others. That's part of being the body. So this morning, I want to talk about, as we move down the list, let's talk about God's design for parenthood. God's design for parenthood, the mission of father and mother. And we'll go back to Genesis 1, verse 27. Genesis 1:27, where we get the mission. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over everything. And he goes on and talks about the trees and the plants and everything that has breath. I've given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. So part of this parenthood, part of our mission as humans is this mission of parenthood. Be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. And what do we do once we've multiplied? Now, be fruitful isn't limited to just having offspring. Multiplying would be, the command to multiply would be specific to having offspring. But being fruitful wouldn't necessarily be specific just to offspring. But what do we do once we have offspring? Some of you call them children. Some of you call them brats. Some of you call them the kids, whatever. But what do you do once you have offspring? Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently. So we're revisiting some of these household passages that apply to parenthood. That we gave you in the second week of this series. Teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them. What will we talk about? The commands, the principles, the things, the instructions that God has given us in his word. And you shall talk of them when you sit in your house. And now again, he says, teach them diligently to your children. So when you're in your home with your children, you want to talk of these principles. You want to talk of these commands. You want to talk of loving God and loving others. When you walk by the way, so when you go for a walk, when you're on your way to a destination, they would not have had cars or vans or SUVs in Deuteronomy, and so we could probably say when you're in the car on your way somewhere, when you walk by the way, talk of these things, teach them diligently. When you lie down, when you rise, when you're going to bed, when you're waking up, talk of these things. Talk of loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Talk of loving your neighbor as yourself. Talk of the precepts and the principles that God gives us on how to live. You shall bind them. So you don't just talk about them, but you shall bind them as a sign on your hand to remind you of everything that you do is all for the glory of God. So you bind them as a sign on your hand. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes. Everything you look at, everything you assess, everything you view should be viewed through how can I bring glory to God through this situation, in this environment, with these things. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Everywhere you look should be a reminder of we are here to glorify God and enjoy his presence forever. Then we get a little more specific in the book of Colossians. We get specific to children. Children, obey your parents in everything. Obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. That should be enough, right? It pleases the Lord that children obey their parents. And there's an unspoken thing there, right? If you're going to obey your parents, then your parents are there to give you instruction, right? The parents are there to give you instruction. And when you're giving instruction, fathers in particular, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. We're going to talk about that and kind of unpack that here in a minute. Let's go down to Ephesians chapter 6. Verses 1 through 4, another household passage specific to parenthood and raising children. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It pleases the Lord, and it's right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. God blesses those who obey their parents. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. All right? So there are other passages that can be applied. Again, if I had time, I would encourage you to read the Proverbs. You go through the Proverbs. My son, hear my instruction. You hear the father giving lots of instruction to the son, to the sons and the daughters. There's a lot of familial instruction there. So we're seeing God's mission for parenthood being applied in the Proverbs. And so if you've never read the Proverbs, let me encourage you to do it this way. Proverbs has 31 chapters. So it makes it a really simple read throughout a month. And so a month with 31 days, you can read one chapter a day. A month with 30 days, you can either skip chapter 31, you can skip chapter 1, but if you read, chapter 1 on June 1st and chapter 2 on June 2nd and chapter 3 on June 3rd, you can get through it. And then, let's see, June has 30 days, have September, April, June, and November, right? So June only has 30, so on the 30th day, you could read 30 and 31. Or you could wait till July 1st and read chapter 31, right? But I would challenge you to do that. Read it with your kids and talk about the things that you're reading in there. So, but God's commissioned and He's blessed humanity with the charge to be fruitful and multiply. He's ordained that children be brought into the world only through the procreative activity of a husband and a wife, and only to married parents. That's God's instruction. The ordinary privilege and responsibility of married people is to have and to rear children. Now, that is not always the case. We've said there are exceptions. There are some that in God's wisdom and for God's purposes that we may not ever know. We may know one or two of God's purposes in that, but in God's wisdom and for His purposes, not every couple can bear children. And so it's not, people without children are not being sinful to not have children. But it is a command to mankind. This is God's plan for mankind. Parents have their primary responsibility and the God-given authority to teach their children. Parents are responsible for their children's general education. And again, responsible doesn't mean that every parent has to educate their own children, their own child. I happen to believe that that is best case scenario. I happen to believe that if at all possible, you as parents should be the primary educators for your children in general education. That would be best case scenario. So, Daryl, are you saying if we don't homeschool our children, then we are sinning? Did I say that? I did not say that. I'm saying best case scenario, that is the best way, and especially in the culture in which we live. But if you are entrusting the authority of educating your children, if you're entrusting that authority to a school, I don't care if it's a Christian school, I don't care if it's a private school, I don't care if it's a homeschool co-op, if you're entrusting the authority of if you're sharing the authority of educating your children with someone else in a public school, a private school, a Christian school, a homeschool co-op, you are still the primary responsibility. You are primarily responsible for the education they receive. And so as parents, we need to be involved. We need to be involved in the education of our kids. And so that's our responsibility, the general education of our kids. But always remembering, the reason we're responsible for that is because their education is designed to bring glory to God, and they can enjoy Him forever. And so the primary reason to learn to read is so they can learn to read the Word. The primary reason to learn to write is so that they can leverage who they are and what they've been given to reach their neighbors, their city, and their world, to teach their own families. We spend a lot of time as parents hoping and speaking against our kids ever getting married. And I get it. I mean, I really do. I get when our kids are younger and, people are going, oh, they're growing up, won't be long and they'll be getting married. Stop it, we say. Don't wish my kids older before they get there. And that's very true, but that doesn't mean that we postpone teaching them what married life is like. Doesn't mean that we postpone teaching them what being a godly wife is like. It doesn't mean we postpone teaching them what being a godly husband is like. Just because we're teaching them at 10 and 11 and 12 what it's like to participate in a marriage relationship, it doesn't mean that we're preparing them to get married at 15, right? It doesn't mean they're going to go out and get married at 18. But if they do, if you've taught them well, praise the Lord. But if they do and you haven't taught them well, oh me, right? We have a responsibility. Parents are responsible for their children's general education. Parents are responsible for their children's spiritual education, their theological education. Again, I am so thankful that we as a church provide. Our kids are in kids worship makers right now. And I don't know if you have any idea what goes on down there. I know the results that you see is usually a little stage program, right? That's the results you see, and they're usually fun and hilarious, and something really crazy happens in one of them. One of the kids, usually Titus, is doing something outrageous. Millie Soberpina is knocking Mary out and wanting to take her place. She didn't like being an angel. I mean, something like that's always happening, but that's not the mission of what you checked your kids into this morning when you checked them into Kids Worship Makers. The mission was that we come alongside you and help you instruct your children in how to worship the Lord with their voices. How to worship the Lord using instruments, how to teaching them rhythm, not just so not just so they'll be rhythmic, but so that they can be rhythmic in their worship. So it will enhance their worship. Just like our landscaping team planted some shrubs and put out some mulch, thank you. Yeah, and some pretty little lights and things to spruce up our entrances and things. And it looks beautiful. We don't do that just so people say, oh, that looks beautiful. We do it because this place belongs to the Lord. And this is something the Lord has given us, and we want to care for it well. We want to represent the Lord well. Now, again, can we go overboard with that? Absolutely. Do we? I sure hope not. But again, going overboard, and you took responsibility before I finished my sentence. But when we go overboard, is it really about God or is it about us? Right? Now, so we got to be careful with that. But we're responsible for our children's spiritual education. And so when Kids Worship Makers is going on, we're coming alongside you. Moms and dads, if you're not faithful in teaching your kids how to worship, what we're teaching them is not going to be nearly as effective. Because we're making the supposition we're coming alongside you. And we're also sharing with you and telling you and offering to you over and over and over again resources to help supplement you. If you're not sure, we want to help you be the main one, the responsible ones for your children's spiritual and theological education. That's our goal. And so our kids, our kids men, our Sunday morning kids men, 10:30, our Wednesday night Kids for Christ, all those things are designed and meant to come alongside you, not to replace you and not for you to defer to. Does that make sense? But of course, the most important words of instruction are those of God himself. And he's given us all of these passages that we've talked about this morning. I want to hone in on the one in Ephesians 6:4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Colossians 3:21, don't provoke your children lest they become discouraged. Now, Paul gives this warning in these two verses. Do not provoke your children. I've heard multiple interpretations of this, and I'm gonna give you one that I believe is closest. What does it mean not to provoke your children to anger? What does it mean not to provoke your children? And so some of the things that would fall in line with this, and we'll kind of flesh them out, but don't tempt them. Don't tempt them to sin. Don't overly burden them. Now, I already know there's a question there. We'll get to it, okay? But don't overly burden your kids. Don't frustrate them. Again, that raises questions, right? So yeah, how do I parent kids without frustrating them? How do we keep them from doing that? In my early years of parenting, I've had to apologize a lot to my children. Now, fortunately, everything I remember apologizing to my kids for, they don't remember. But I still apologize for it. Just in case there's a night where they have a dream and remember dad yelling, screaming, and hollering. And sometimes was not pretty. I learned, and I'm not making excuses, but it was a learned behavior that I had to unlearn. That if your kids don't obey instantly, you yell louder. That was a learned behavior. Another learned behavior that I had to unlearn was passive aggressiveness or sarcasm. I hurt my children with sarcasm and had to apologize for that. Another way, in the early years of parenting, I remember thinking how the answer to not only parenting but to pastoring problems was more rules. Any of y'all? Am I the only one? That the remedy, the solution to parenting and pastoring was just more rules. If people, I remember in church specifically, in our kitchen downstairs, the old kitchen, it was our first time to have a kitchen back in 2011. And I put a sign up, and I put a sign up because of a problem, and the sign said, "This may be your father's house, but your mama don't live here. Clean up after yourself," right? And then when people didn't obey that rule, then I put up another sign. And then I put up another sign, and I if I wanted to, I could have plastered the kitchen with signs that would have been completely ignored by people. I was that way as a parent in the early days. I thought rules was the answer to parenting problems. Unfortunately, rules can become a primary way to provoke your children if you don't place them appropriately, an appropriate amount in the right way. A wiser way to avoid provoking our children is to consider this. And I think it was Phillips, Craig, and Dean. I know, I just dated myself. Those of you all probably 45 and older may recognize the name of that group. Phillips, Craig, and Dean, I believe they're the ones that wrote the song, "I Want to Be Just Like You," because he wants to be just like me. It was the song. It was a song often used at Father's Day, and a song about a dad telling God, "I want to be just like you, Father, because my son wants to be just like me." And it talked about the little boy with a bear named Pooh, and it just had some lines in it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's my son!" It kind of rang true for me, and it really that started making me think about what kind of father is God to me. Because God never provokes us. He never provokes us to anger. So if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to follow that instruction, then maybe if I pattern my fatherhood after God's, I might have a better chance. So let me give you a few ways that God calls us to reflect His heart in the way that we raise children. Let's talk about, I went all Baptist preacher on you this morning. They all three start with an A. Attention. Attention. Now, if you've raised your kids, if you're grandparents, if you don't have children, how does this apply to you? You have friends that have children. You have children that have children. And go Titus 2, all right? It is our job as we get older to invest in those that are younger. So attention. Let's talk about attention. And again, there's a positive and a negative here. In the culture of nonstop, ever-present, competing spectacles, giving children our attention can be more challenging than what we think. Giving children the right kind of attention can be more challenging than what we think. There's a lot of voices of distraction. We talked about some of these obstacles in the first week, but become a distraction that are loud and very persistent. And some of these apply to some of you, but not all of them apply to all of you. So just receive what belongs, right? Dirty dishes can be a voice of distraction that's loud and persistent. Dirty laundry, dirty children. And we can sometimes sacrifice giving our children the godly attention they need because we get too fixated on a clean house, clean laundry, or clean children. Now, what am I about to say? Hear what I'm saying, not what I'm not saying. God is not a God of chaos. I'm not saying it's okay for your house to be chaotic, all right? I'm not saying it's okay for you to live like a pig. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that sometimes can get hyper-focused on dirty dishes or a clean sink. We want the sink clean all the time. We don't want any dishes sitting in the dishwasher. I hate laundry sitting in a laundry basket. If you're going to do it, fold it, right? That's a rule for me. But yeah, and sometimes we obsess over our children being dirty. Let them get dirty. Yeah, you need to clean them up, but it's okay if your kids are dirty once in a while. Grocery shopping. I can't, and I don't know. I don't think everything applies to everybody, but some things apply to some people. Sometimes we create jobs out of things that were never meant to be jobs. And we can take grocery shopping and turn it into a task that requires energy that it really doesn't, but we turn it into a job, or we turn things in because it makes us feel better that we've made it this major task. Again, that may not apply to everybody, but time with friends can be a distraction. Fellowship can actually be a distraction. Hanging out with friends. Me time can be a distraction. I hate the term, me time. I need some me time. Women telling their husbands, hey, you need to watch the kids for a while, I need some me time. Well, you should have thought about that before you had kids. Amen. Husbands I've worked hard all day. I need some me time. Well, you should have thought about that before you had kids. Maybe you should have thought about that before you got married. Me time, self-care. Now, I'm not saying we don't need to take care of ourselves, right? But that's why you put your kids to bed at 7 o'clock at night. That's why we have bedtimes. We can, listen, I understand the thinking behind it, but a lot of it's very secular. Never place priority on your self-care over your responsibility to your children. And here's what I'm saying. I think God provides you every instruction in the Word to take care of yourself without having to go to a spa, or without having to go to get your nails done, or without having to go out for a shopping day, or without having to go out for a night with the boys at the bar, all right? God has given you every opportunity to take care of yourself and every instruction to do it without having to carve out this special moment away from everybody. God gives you time in the day to do that. He gives you time in your schedule to do that. Deadlines. Sometimes we let deadlines just overwhelm us. Text messages. Internet browsing. I would like to write a book that I give to every new parent, to which the title is, Put Your Phone Down. Put your phone down. Yes. Now, I have a phone. I have an iPad. I have a MacBook Pro. I have devices. I use them all. I love it. Oh, I have an Apple Watch too. I'm not preaching against devices, but I can visualize. I can close my eyes and I can visualize. Probably I could name you 30 names right now of people who the primary position I see them in is this. No. Listen, again, I'm just saying, I'm not saying they're wrong. Nobody has to give excuses. Okay. But when it comes between giving your children the appropriate attention that they need, that God has designed you to be the one to give, it is sin. It's sin. Put your phones down. The nonstop allure of social media, video games, podcasts, and again, it can be good stuff. But if it gets in the way, it's easy to stop paying attention to the little ones right in front of our eyes. Some parents have mastered the art of tuning out their children. And I just want to encourage you, never brag about that in front of me, because you might get a sermon. We have this uncanny ability to tune out a whining child or ignore little fingers pulling on our shirt when we have something more important to do. My job this morning is this, to remind you the most important thing you have to do is to build into those children. It's the most important responsibility you've been given at this time in your life. God isn't like that, is he? It's not like that. He says, I'll instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Psalm 32:8. Jesus teaches us that his eye is on us. In fact, he's always watching us. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his steadfast love. We're never out of God's sight. We always have his attention. Now, we can't be like God in that completely. Let's use some reason. Sometimes we have to go to work, right? Matter of fact, God's designed us to work. Our children need to know they have our attention. We need to have common sense with it. That means patient listening. We can help our children out by not finishing their sentences for them. Let them finish the sentence. Listen to them. Now, I had a child that would start a sentence and forget what he was going to say. I just gave away which child it was, didn't I? He'd start, and he had to do this because he had three very, very chatty females in the family. And he was spent all day long with them, and they talked all the time, at the same time. And so he would think of something, and he'd start to talk, and then he'd forget what he was going to say. And he'd stutter, and we'd have to instruct Brian, use your words. Think about what you're going to say before you say it. And he would tell us, somebody else will start talking before I'm able to. So again, we get it, but yeah, listen to your children. It means patient listening, focusing, stoop down to eye level with your kids. Get down on the floor with your kids. Spend time. Often requires saying no to other activities. Everybody practice with me. No. No. Say it aloud. No. It's okay to say no, unless I ask you. It's okay to say no. Sometimes you have to say no to other activities. I know we were talking to the 40As earlier. We've got one going into 7th grade now, and we were just talking about, oh wow, the years go fast. And our kids don't think that the years go fast, but we know they do. And someone asked me yesterday at McKenna's open house, someone said, so your kids still in college? I'm like, oh, heck no. Oh no, they're all out of college. 2 of them are married. One of them's almost married. We can't move the date up fast enough. But no, we're out of that stage of life. But we're out of that stage of life. It's only a season. Parenting is only a season. Do not sacrifice your children for other things that you can do once they're out of the house. Turning off, turning down the TV or music, putting the phone down, closing your computer. Now, of course, let's give the other side of this. Children need to learn, they need to be taught not to interrupt adults. They need to be taught to respect the conversations of others. And so it is okay. I'm not talking about giving them the attention they want, all right? But giving them the attention they need. And so, mommy, I'm talking right now. It's okay to say that. But don't say, shh, I'm talking right now. I'm talking right now. Let mommy finish. Let dad finish this conversation. But then go back to it. Follow up. And maybe get down and bring their face in. Sorry, some of you can't see me. Get their face in between your hands and say, all right, what can I help you with? What can I help you with? Every parent, even dads, need to be able to sense the difference between giving them the attention they want and giving them the attention they need. Too often we seek to parent our kids without really knowing them or understanding them. We can view them as interruptions, we can view them as nuisances or obstacles to what we want to accomplish unless they're asleep. And then we love them. I meet a lot of parents who love the idea of children. They love the idea of these little beings that will love them unconditionally. And sometimes you hear that in counseling when people say, we thought, we weren't getting along well. We thought if we had a baby, it would help. You're an imbecile. Never happened. Never happened.
I thought you just said we didn't know what life was going to be like until it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I do premarital counseling. We love the idea of children. We love the idea that others will pay attention to us if we have children. But raising our children for God's glory is what we want to accomplish. And to do that, we need to give them our attention. Number 2, affection. Oh my goodness, it's 10:15. Did you move the clock, Matt? How did we get there? All right, I'll finish these next week. I got the first one, yeah. All right, baby steps. All right, God bless you, you're dismissed. Go potty, get coffee. See you back in here. Eric Henry.